Monday, December 15th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, we're jumping into the water and diving deep for a conversation about shipwrecks and this province. Quite a group of folks here to talk shipwrecks today. This is one of those times when I talked to Arlette Lazarenko, show AP, and I'm like, Arlette, let's just try to find a bunch of folks and talk about shipwrecks, because I had it in my calendar as a notion, and then she found like a bunch of great people. You're going to meet them all, and then we're going to talk all about the curiosities, the ins and outs of whether it's diving down to wrecks, studying things afterwards, looking at clothing for what folks wore, you name it. We're talking about all of it today for Newfoundland and Labrador. And as you're listening, if you have thoughts for us or questions, send us a note, thesignal@cbc.ca, or you can text us, 709-327-8206. So what we'll do, I'll go to each of you and give me like the best introduction of yourself, and then we'll just kind of start talking. The original shipster, Heather Elliot, is here. How you doing?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
Good. So tell us about yourself, and specifically about shipwrecks.
Sure. So I am actually a CFA. I'm originally from Ontario. Been here for 14 years now. Started studying shipwrecks when I was probably about 4. It's a lifelong hobby for me. And I started my blog, The Original Shipster, back in 2015, largely because I was super thrilled to have been living in this province a few years at that point, living right next to a port and in a place just so steeped with maritime history, and had friends constantly ask me, tell me about this boat. Tell me about this ship. What do you know about this? And I was conveniently sitting in the ship pub with a friend of mine, and she had asked me about a ship that was in the harbor, and I rattled off some facts, as I want to do. And she said, you're like a shipster. I was like, I beg your pardon? She goes, it's like a hipster, but for boats. Like, you were into ships before they were cool. And I was like, I don't think it's ever been cool, but like, I'm stealing that now. And it's become my whole brand.
Give us, I love the brand and The Original Shipster. What's a random something you can tell folks that your friends find interesting or have found interesting when you told them?
We have a passenger liner wrecked just outside of the Narrows that nobody talks about. The SS Marsland went down in the 1930s. She went up against the rocks right under Fort Amherst, and there's actually photographs at the Maritime History Archive of this passenger liner right up under the lighthouse. And she got stuck, and they tried to salvage her. Didn't work. But she wouldn't be moved at all. So the British Navy was in the area doing drills, and they were talking about bringing the HMS Norfolk over to blast it off of the side of Fort Amherst. But then an October gale came along and did the work for them. And so she actually sits just off of Fort Amherst there, but no one really knows. We think about the wrecks as the ones that are a bit further afield from St. John's, but we literally have one right in our backyard.
Didn't know that. That's wild. Thank you for... I just do this all day. Give me something else. All right, Neil Burgess is back. How you doing?
Hey, very good.
Good, man. Well, tell everyone about yourself.
I'm a retired wildlife biologist, and when I retired, I was getting into shipwrecks big time. My wife and I started diving probably 15 years ago, and the more I dove on the Bell Island shipwrecks, the more I got interested in their history and the people that were on board and what happened to them and all that. So I talked to people at archaeology department in Munn, and nobody was really doing underwater work. So a bunch of us started up a charity to look at shipwreck history and shipwreck archaeology across Newfoundland and Labrador.
What's same type of a question? What's some kind of interesting little factoid to jump things off with that that people are always impressed with or curious about when you mention it?
Well, I mean, we've been lucky to have a great partnership with the with the Marine Institute, and they've been helping us find shipwrecks. There's a lot of accounts in newspapers, in official documents of ships going down, but we don't know where the actual wreck is nowadays. So they're going out with really sophisticated sonar on their ships, doing biological projects and ghost net projects. And as they're going by shipwreck sites, we give them the coordinates and they take a look for us and see what they can find. And they've found a Royal Navy submarine down off St. Shots. And I'm really looking forward this summer to diving on it.
A Royal Navy submarine.
From World War II.
What do we know about how it ended up there?
It was stationed in Newfoundland to train the Royal Canadian Navy escort ships that were escorting convoys across the Atlantic to Britain. And it was basically a dummy submarine for them to go out and train with so they'd learn how to use their sonars. And one night it was transiting from Argentia to St. John's, came around the Southern Avalon in the fog, and ran into a Canadian minesweeper that was waiting to escort ore ships from Wabana over to Sydney in Cape Breton. And this warship had been told that there were 2 U-boats off of Cape Race. And so in the fog, this submarine on the surface suddenly appears before them. And the inquiry said that they flashed it with a Morse lamp, friend or foe, didn't get an answer, and they just rammed the submarine and sank it.
Wow.
With all the guys on board. So really tragic. And they were unable to rescue anybody from the ship. And that was the end of the story for a few months, and then a body washed up at Portugal Cove South, and they identified it. He had a wallet. And they ended up having a full military burial for him in Fairland. And there's pictures of that we've got.
I mean, that's quite the story.
Yeah.
And to think it's something, there's a bunch of stories we've heard, but then when you, like, as per this conversation today, the unearthing, the figuring out what kind of things that have happened to bring it back into collective memory to discuss about, it's, why do you think that's so important these days?
I think it goes back to what Heather was saying. Newfoundland was a seafaring place for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Now we're a Costco going to place.
Exactly. We're all in cars and pickup trucks and zooming around, but we forget how everything that you'd buy in a store or you'd wear for clothes or your tools you would use in the back shed, everything came to your community by ship. Everything. All your visitors, all your visiting relatives, everything moved by ship. And there were probably as many schooners in Newfoundland as there are pickup trucks nowadays, 200 years ago. And there were accidents. I mean, you only have to look out the weather today, tonight, tomorrow, that if you were out on a ship, it'd be catastrophic. So there's a lot of shipwrecks down there. A lot of communities have their whole kind of identity tied with local shipwrecks. I mean, anybody on Bell Island, those World War II shipwrecks are part of their identity. With the Water Witch and Cupids, like there's all these communities that have their, if you go into a community museum, there's going to be a shipwreck story up on the wall somewhere.
Wow.
Either a ship from that community that sank somewhere else, or local folks were involved in rescuing people in a shipwreck from anywhere in the world that happened on their doorstep.
That's wild. Alexa Bailey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Tell us about yourself.
I volunteer kind of all over
Yeah.
St. John's when it comes to history, but specifically, I am a researcher with the Maritime History Archive with the 2 ladies who you will meet later on. And also, I'm a volunteer with the Admiralty House Communications Museum in Mount Pearl, a small community museum that actually has its own small connection to the Florizel.
Well, tell us about that then. What's the connection?
The connection is when the Florizel went down in 1918, they sent out an SOS. The place to receive that was actually the HMS Marconi Wireless Station in Mont Pearl. At the time during World War I, it was a quote-unquote top-secret Navy military base.
See, when I think about Mount Pearl, I don't think top secret military anything, and yet here it is.
Yeah, the original building is still there, though it's a communication / now Florizel and Mont Pearl History Museum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's wild. All right, so that's Alexa. Julia Stryker's here. Hi, how you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Good. Tell us about yourself.
I am Julia Stryker. I'm currently on a variety of projects. I am an adjunct to the history department at MUN, former Pratt postdoc with the history department as well, and I do most of my research in the Maritime History Archive here, where I've got a couple of projects running. One working with Alexa and some other students on the possessions of dead seafarers recorded in ship's logs, and another called the Swan Project about women's participation in ocean industries.
And there was a bit I was reading on you about, and just to tell folks, I think it was it sea blindness, meaning like just our loss of when thinking of maritime history. Can you tell us a bit about just that and the concern around it?
Sure. So actually it's really interesting because, as you were saying, everything used to come in on boats. Well, actually, everything still does. The vast majority of consumer products that are being shipped around the world are being shipped via ship. And we just don't hear about it anymore. We're just very separate from that reality. Sea blindness is a term that came up in, or at least for me, came up through British survey work. Because, of course, the British have a very long tradition of seeing themselves as a seafaring people. And they still do. But then you ask them to, name the Spice Girls. They can do that. Name a naval captain, and they can't.
Yeah.
It's not all Navy stuff. But still, so it became a very going concern that particularly as islands, which Newfoundland is as well, people have really just don't understand how much of the world is still tied up in maritime travel and how important it is to the way that modernity functions.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Meaghan Walker's here. Hi.
Hi,
Tell us about yourself.
I'm Meaghan Walker. I am also from formerly at MUN as a postdoctoral Ewart Pratt researcher. And I also work with the MHA. Right now, I'm sort of a freelance researcher, lady about town. And I'm also come from away. I'm from New Brunswick, and I came here. I grew up on a dairy farm, and I ran away to sea, is how I say it. The farm boy who ran away to sea.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So tell us something from a curiosity, a note of interest from your research when it comes to the maritime world and shipwrecks.
Well, I have my formal research, which actually evolved into the project that Julia and Alexa are working on with clothing. But my personal pet project is that I collect and research kind of the stupid pop culture crap that was the product of the sinking of the Titanic. So I was a 90s kid, and like every 90s kid, we went through a Titanic phase. And the Titanic sort of research area is a little crowded. So I bought Clive Cussler's Raise the Titanic for my birthday as sort of a stupid, guilty piece of trash to read, and then I was like, there must be more of this.
Is there ever?
And yes, is there ever? So I've developed several theories on sort of the mythology of the Titanic, which closely relates to its ability to sell products, and so both itself as a product and a hoard of trash, and also obviously its longstanding meme status, which is much older than the internet, was already in development very early as like a political cartoon hubris symbol, and has seen and then the internet got a hold of it, and now it's like spun out of control like everything else.
Yeah, well, it's kind of wild that it was just making content all those years, and it's just like waiting, and the internet comes. It's like, well, we've got the memes are all ready. Like we're here.
It's been 84 years.
On the clothing side of things, for the research, tell us a bit more about that project and why it's and like what we can learn from it and why it's important.
I guess I should probably.
Sure.
Technically, I guess I'm in charge, even though it's Meaghan's idea that I've turned into a project that
right.
Alexa has taken somewhere amazing with records I haven't even looked at yet. But what it is that these official logbooks that we have, and of course this is the great resource that is the Maritime History Archive here in St. John's, these official logbooks are not logbooks recording weather. They're logbooks recording everything that Parliament wanted to know.
Okay.
So Parliament wants to know who gets born. Lots of people being born on ships. It wants to know who dies. It wants to know whenever disciplinary action happened. So they're a very interesting collection of things. And one of the things is, of course, it was a long seafaring tradition to auction off the possessions of seafarers who died during the voyage. So these end up, not through Parliament's request, though eventually Parliament does request it, becoming inventories that are recorded in these logs. So what we have is this sort of snapshot picture of the things that regular travelers, regular working people, the kind of people that don't leave diaries, that don't leave records, the kind of people that sometimes you barely have a name for them in the logbooks themselves. And we have a snapshot of everything they owned, everything that was important to them, that they thought they should carry with them into a new life, on a voyage, all of these other things. So we end up learning a whole lot about sort of regular people, the things they possessed, the way these things moved around the world. You learn about commerce and trade, ready-made goods, which is something that Meaghan can probably talk more about, because this is right in the period where this is really exploding. So very interesting.
All right, so Meaghan, ready-made goods, go.
Yeah, I do a lot of work on ready-made clothing. I've looked at sort of their origin as a military good. So before 1850, the British Navy didn't have uniforms for their ratings, so their regular sailors. Only the officers wore uniforms. And so before that, they would contract for slop clothes, which are mass-produced piecework items, so women at home making clothes, in sort of a mass production capacity, being paid by the piece. This is like your Temu today, so it's still a thing that exists and around the world. And so, so there was like a uniformity of a kind in the sense that the clothes were being contracted on government contracts, but they were civilian clothes. And after the war ended in 1815, that contractor market ceased because they weren't recruiting as many sailors to the Navy. So the contractors had to pivot to other markets. So they already had a ready market in sailors, which is why I study specifically maritime men's ready-made clothes, because they're sort of the starting point for this. But as the 19th century goes on, my theory is that the ready-made market expands into working men's clothing broadly, which means that the sailor clothes of the early 19th century becomes working men's clothing by the late 19th century. And so I've been poking around Ryan Records in Bonavista, sort of looking for ready-made clothes appearing in Bonavista as sort of a current project that I'm working on, which is very interesting. Because they are there, but very little. And they're obviously being used to supplement women's domestic work in the home, like unpaid, just household production. But also a big part, I think, of the expanding ready-made market is young men going to sea. They lose access to women who are making their clothes, and as well as young men moving to urban centers to follow like industrial work, and to have young women go to urban centers and stop making clothes at home because they're working in factories.
Wow. All right. So Alexa, for yourself, tell us a bit, like what's something that like recently for the work you've been doing that kind of has stuck with you around interest?
So a lot of my stuff is I've taken on like literally 1900 to like 1953. So for me, it's been the change of the amount of products that sailors and passengers, because we get both records, have with them and what they're bringing with them on their voyages, what they have access to as time goes on, and changing of, so you have basics like cotton clothing, and then later on the 50s, sort of like the early nylon starting to come on. A lot of times through the 20s, 30s, 50s, you see a lot of electronics start coming in. Some sailors who might have had a bit more means in the 20s, 30s had gramophones they took with them.
Right.
Records, radio clocks, potentially. In the 50s, these are more commonplace, where you have even the most basic sailors have like a half-decent watch, a radio clock with them. And then there's a difference of people from the UK and the British kind of Commonwealth, and then like sailors and passengers from China. Differences in types of clothing, maybe traditional clothing versus just working clothing. You have men who are coming from China. They are carrying money from China specifically, and different denominations of where they're working around Asia, but they also have Chinese clothing, as is written in the record, whatever traditional at the time, and quote unquote Chinese medicine or Chinese drugs. It's just traditional Chinese medicine. And then you also see at the beginnings that from the 1900s on, like men just maybe carry a razor. And then you see, start in the 20s, start seeing specific brands. Gillette starts being actually mentioned, Gillette razors, or specific like soaps.
What I mean, because to think of 1900 compared to the early 50s, like worlds apart,
Completely.
And then for what people would have for traveling and that type of a thing. So Neil, for yourself, as someone who dives these things, like we're talking about records and finding out, like all of a sudden you see Gillette appear, or like Irish Spring, or I don't know, whatever. Anyways, you see that kind of a thing. What's it like under the water for kind of gaining a bit of knowledge around what was there before?
I'd say when you're diving on shipwrecks, they're all in all different states. Some of them, it's just a few planks left on the bottom. Some of them, it's only ceramics. That's pottery and stuff that's left. Other ones, like the Bell Island shipwrecks, big steel ships, they still have their three-dimensional structure, and they have all the parts of a ship that you'd expect. Winches and anchors and smokestacks and all that. But it's when you come across the personal items, a shoe or a toothbrush or a hairbrush, that for me, that stops me in my tracks. When I just stop swimming and I look at it and I think about the person that was attached to, right? In the case of shoes, the person who was probably wearing it when the ship went down. And it gets you thinking so much more about the people that were on that ship rather than, the hulk of a shipwreck that you're physically exploring.
Yeah, I mean, each wreck, right? It's yes, there's the story of the wreck itself, but that means it's a people story, and then it's the folks who were on it, their families, what it meant to communities at the time, and like you said, you can go into so many communities around this province, and the local museum is going to have and then there's this ship that we're remembering because of the folks that we lost, or also, I guess, like rescue stories as well come out of this. The stories of saving folks when they come in. Heather, what about yourself? Like when it comes to some of the digging through and researching, like what kind of stands out for you for what you discover and what you learn from it?
The human interest aspect is one of the biggest reasons I do this kind of work. We've touched on it a couple of times, but the sea blindness, the fact that like we really in 2025 do not have a full concept of how integral this was as a method of transportation for our society for centuries. And I think it's one thing to be able to capture like the story of the ship, but I love reading the stories about the people who served on it. When I did my, I just finished my master's research last year. It was on gender in the maritime sector, and it was literally talking to people who in modern context go to sea for work and kind of how their gender impacts that experience. And so when I'm researching a particular shipwreck, I'm always interested in kind of the history of the captain? How much do we know about the person who was in charge? What are the stories that really piqued the interest in, say, a rescue effort? So for the SS Ethe on the West Coast, for example, you had the bosun line that brought everybody ashore, including a little girl who was put into a mail bag to get her off the boat. You know, and it's those little stories that make it so much more than just, because when you do this research, it gets very repetitive. Boat in fog, boat hit rock, boat sink, sad, next.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to highlight those human interest aspects. Titanic is an excellent example that's been done to death, unfortunately, but where those individual experiences really humanize it and make it, oh no, these were actual experiences that happened to actual people. It's not just a headline. It's not just a couple of paragraphs in the Telegram in 18 whenever. It was something that happened and impacted people.
Yeah, no, there's more stories about other rafts with space for Jack on the map there, right?
Exactly. The other interesting thing is you would have instances, especially in Newfoundland, we know it's a very rural area, their communities are very far apart. You would have ships that would wreck in the middle of a storm, in the middle of the night, and then locals might come across the wreck site a couple of days, a couple of weeks later, and sometimes take it upon themselves to recover what bodies they could and to lay them to rest. So there's actually a tradition of, like, there are burial mounds around this province on the coastline that carry the remains of people who were lost at sea. But for one reason or another, whether it's the bodies couldn't be sent back to St. John's because it was the dead of winter, or they were so decomposed that there was no way that they could be transported, you know, that's their final resting place. And that's a form of, I think, you know, memorialization around shipwrecks that we don't talk about a lot, is the fact that, you know, in some cases, these people were laid to rest, but we just don't know where.
What do we know? Like, it would have to be rough, but like the estimate of like shipwrecks around this province, like the only thing that comes to my mind is like a lot. But can we do better than that?
The mythology is 10,000.
Okay.
And I mean, I think that's probably more true than wrong.
Yeah.
I think the real number would be in that ballpark.
That's a lot of stories.
It's a lot. I mean, there's a really great map in the Queen Elizabeth Library at Munn.
Oh, I've seen this one.
The blueprint map, and it's covers about 50 years, the second half of the 1800s, and there's 700 shipwrecks around just the island of Newfoundland from those 50 years. So if you expand that out to the 500 years that ships were active and are active around our province,
Yeah.
that's thousands.
Gosh. Yeah, it's so many. So with that, like, and we look at now as we are about to enter 2026 and talking about the sea blindness of kind of losing our, perhaps not thinking as much or forgetting some history. And then, I mean, you folks are trying to help preserve it. When incidents come out, like I've got on my screen here, the 2021 Suez Canal obstruction, the Ever Given. So this, I think, was a collective learning lesson for the world of like, it's like, what do you mean stuff's not going to arrive because someone has plugged the Suez Canal and that actually impacts us in Newfoundland and Labrador? How is that possible? What were your thoughts around something like that? People who understand, who think of history, who think of the ocean, like the maritime go-arounds. Who wants to go first?
After we all stopped collectively giggling, you mean?
Yeah.
Big boat, boat stuck.
I mean, it's pretty great. I do, and this is usually what I do is I go, yes, that is hilarious, and also I had a really good time, and I did share every single meme that I saw, and also those poor seafarers.
There you go.
Absolutely.
The actual condition of the seafarers becomes a very, very precarious one. And you saw the same thing during COVID, right? So we didn't know what to do with these boats. You can't let them in. You're going to do quarantine, but you're going to get the passengers off. The seafarers, however, have no recourse. If the shipping company does not want to take on the responsibility, and they don't ever, because it costs money, of taking care of those seafarers, making sure that they get back home, they are just stranded. They are abandoned.
Yep.
They are not allowed off the vessel They are discharged from their contracts when the wreck happens. Their contract usually officially ends, and they have no way to get home unless they somehow coordinate with a consulate or something. There is nobody that's going to come and help them. So those seafarers got extremely stuck, just like the boat.
What is it about the ocean? Because you hear about that with seafarers, and also sometimes through some of the fishing side of things, on the whether you want to call it the black market, legal side of things. There's a lot of folks who are nowadays still like a lot of folks who are in some pretty bad conditions on the ocean. Like, why is that? Is it because of just the laws of the sea, the lack of international laws? I always joke about I don't want to go on a cruise because if I disappear, no one's going to find me, type of a thing, and because these things happen.
Yeah, I could share possibly one of my favorite quotes from my research, which has to do with the because I also do a lot of maritime law stuff. It has to do with the fact that all the papers that I work with came about at about the 1850s. There was a huge reformation of American law. They basically repealed the whole chunk of it and redid it, which is pretty impressive. And then in the 1970s, they did it again. And the quote at the time was, maritime law has been dragged kicking and screaming into the 19th century.
Right. Yeah.
So a lot hasn't changed, as a matter of fact, since then.
The unfortunate part is oftentimes it takes a tragedy for things to change.
Yeah.
So if you look at Titanic, again, is a good example of there were a lot of regulations around safety equipment, around that's how we got the iceberg patrol, which just stopped last year. That was very sad. A lot of stuff came out of that. There was a wreck in London, Ontario, actually. A steamship was overfilled. And the passengers decided to watch two rowboats racing down the river, and they capsized the ship, and a bunch of people died. And from that came a lot of regulations around pre-departure inspections and cargo manifests and passenger limits. So again, when you're looking at it in the modern context of how a lot of these people end up in these precarious positions, it takes, unfortunately, usually a tragedy to shine light on the fact that, this was a problem we should have been paying attention to. Oops.
Well, I mean, it reminds me of years ago when I did damage control firefighting school with the Navy for just being on ship, and we watched videos of what they learned from the Falklands, and for uniforms, they're like, polyester was not a good choice when things might catch fire, and they changed after that, right? And we watched and kind of learned from the tragedy of it.
The MV Flare is another really good example. So that was a cargo vessel that sank off the coast of Newfoundland, between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia in the 1980s. She split in half in a storm. And it's truly horrific because the testimony of the 3 survivors, I think, is basically they all sent a mayday and went up on deck. And they saw a bow coming out of the sleet and snow and mess and thought, oh, great, there's a ship nearby, we're saved. And it was their own bow.
Oh, wow.
It's horrifying. But it was part of the conversation of, at that point, cargo ships were basically called, like container ships, I'm talking the big ones, were coffin ships for how often they sank. And a lot of reform came from that sinking, and that was the 1980s. So it is a recurring problem, but it's really a case of these laws no one wants to rewrite a law.
No.
Especially not a law that pertains to an international application, because there's so much that you have to take into consideration. And so these laws often do get kicked into or dragged into whatever time we are in, kicking and screaming, because there's enough people who are like, hey, this is serious, fix it now.
Yeah. Wow.
It took 10 years to standardize the size of a container ship. Or of the container, like the square box.
Yeah.
Just to say that this is the size we all agree, everyone at this table, 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
And if they're the same size, it makes it easier for everyone to ship them all over. And so then when we go to buy something later today at any of the box stores, it arrives together, right? And if they're different sizes, that costs money, and it's a pain in the butt.
And you can take them off and put them onto a train bed, and you can take them off a train and put them onto a transport truck. But originally, they were all sized depending on the shipper, so that they could have their own little regional enclaves, almost the same way that rail ties used to be different gauges. So, like, if you were on one line, everyone would have to get off the train and switch to another train car because the other line had a different gauge and the trains couldn't switch over.
Okay.
And Britain had to change that overnight. Like one night, they just changed all the gauges so they all matched. So rail is doing a lot better than than shipping. But yeah, in the old days, it used to be that you would have like one shipping brand, and they would have their own proprietary container, and that would serve all of like North Carolina or something. Huh. And then if you wanted to use somebody else's, you would have to unpack the container and pack it in another container. But then they realized that was impeding capitalism.
Well, so if you want change, that's the way to
You got to cost some people some money.
People realize it. They'll bring in change. When you deal in the world of facts, but then also it's the ocean and there's so many urban legends and so much lore and everything else, what's it like kind of operating in the fact-based space, but also, I don't know, maybe enjoying some of the urban legendy stuff? Like where are we with this?
Well, the lore is great.
Okay.
If I'm writing an article for my blog, I do have a solid rule for myself. That is, if I see something like a fact, I need to be able to vet it into other sources before I will write it, because I've gotten burned before. Yeah. So when it comes to stuff that I'll actually put out, I'll have a caveat that's like, a theory is, but some of them are wild, and it's great.
Such as?
I mean, we were talking before the show about the Orlova and
the Lubov Orlova.
The cannibal rat ghost ship, and the fact that it spawned not only a Twitter account, which was great, but like the amount of just myths and lore around. Is she still above water? Is it not? What happened? Is there a small island of cannibal rats just floating out in the North Atlantic? Who knows?
Like cannibal rat boat.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it alive? Is it dead?
It took on such a life of its own that Billy Talent wrote a song about it. Like it just we have these little things that, ostensibly, boat go out in ocean, take on water, goodbye.
Yeah.
But that it took on a character all of itself. And kind of created its own mythology was wild.
Yeah, and this was it was a former passenger cruiser for Russia, and it's named after a famous Russian performer, actress. There you go. I have not even looked at this stuff in years.
Excavating it out
it's
of
like
your
in the
memory.
back of my brain here. And then someone bought it. It was in St. John's, and then it was being towed, and then the tow snapped. I think. Yeah.
So the vessel had been contracted out as like doing the adventure cruises. So we see those a lot coming through St. John's. They do like the circumnavigations of the province or go up to Greenland, Iceland, that kind of thing. And the Russian company hadn't been paying its employees, I believe.
Okay.
And so it was seized at the port of St. John's because they owed a lot of people money. And so the crew was offloaded and the ship just sat there, and the owners were like, we don't want it. You can keep it. And the port was like, wait, this was not the deal. And then eventually somebody else came in and bought it and sent a tugboat that, in my personal, not professional, because I don't work in the industry, but opinion, was way too small. And then the tow line broke and it ended up just drifting into international waters, and everyone was kind of like, question mark?
Yeah.
I guess it's gone now.
What happened to it? And then, that's why it may have been like a Daily Mail. The Cannibal Rats was like one of the tabloidy,
Ireland,
shocker, one of the tabloids did it.
Yeah, Ireland was very upset because they thought they were going to end up with a biohazard up on their shores, and then the Daily Mail grabbed that and was like, Canada's shipping us, cannibal rats, and it just got blown way out of proportion.
Oh. Well, there's a memory, the Lubov Orlova.
I know.
Yeah,
it's
I
great.
got to go on her before it sailed out to its doom for CBC.
Well, those are the good ones, though, because I have to say, like, when we're talking about lore and shipwrecks and all these kinds of things, they'll see these articles, they always do the headline. It's like, oh my God, the ship went out and mysteriously disappeared. And it's not mysterious.
No.
It went out into the ocean. The ocean ate it.
Yeah.
That is what happened. The ocean eats things. It's not mysterious. It's mysterious that any of them survive whatsoever.
I'm taking
have-
that. That was great.
I have a lot of patience for a lot of things, but the Bermuda Triangle is one that drives me nuts because I'm like, oh, you drew a shape around a bunch of islands and shoals in a place where hurricanes form, and you're like, it's a mystery why boats disappear here. No, it's not. It's very easy to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, you could easily label with the shipwrecks around this province, like draw the triangle.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, look at this weird space. It's like, yeah, big old rocky shoreline and a bunch of communities that needed supplies over the years. And
Yeah.
and there's a lot of fog. Shocker.
I guess there's one for Alaska too, and it's just drawn over the uninhabited part of Alaska, and you're like, yeah, people disappear in the part of Alaska where nobody lives. Wow.
Something I've enjoyed in terms of ship-related lore has been, particularly with the Terror in the Erebus up in Nunavut, how when they discovered the wrecks, they were like, oh, they were here, and we had Indigenous
Oh, yeah.
people telling us that they were here, and we were looking for them over there. And I'm sitting going, yeah, it's funny what happens when you talk to the people who live there.
Yeah, like-
Because we've had it happen before where a wreck will happen and the locals are like, yep, we saw it happen. This is what happened. And the inquiry's like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you mean in Shipwreck Bay next door that we've named for decades? Yeah, no, the ship is in Shipwreck Bay. That's
White
why
people
we named
died
it.
here at Cove.
I'll jump in here as the devil's advocate and tell you, we run down a lot of leads from,
Yeah.
especially from fishermen
Yeah,
around
yeah.
the province.
Yeah.
And I would say our success rate is less than 50%
Okay.
because it's often a story that was passed on or a friend of a friend who was on a different boat. They saw this and it was right over there and we'll go and take a look and there's nothing there.
No.
So it's location information is pretty complex. And to be fair to the guys in Parks Canada looking for the Erebus and Terror, there was more than one location in Inuit knowledge. So they had to search a lot of locations.
That's very fair.
But there is Terror Bay, which is where they found the terror. So somebody knew it was there. Anyway, but I just want to bring up one case that intersects with what Heather's been doing, and that's a wreck called the Hazel Pearl. My wife and I were on a shipwreck diving expedition that Ocean Quest Adventures had going across the province in the beginning of September. And when we rolled into Trinity, the owner of Ocean Quest, Rick Stanley, was talking to some local folks, and they put him on to a shipwreck over in Champneys West. So we thought, okay, let's go over and have a look. I've got a decent sonar on my boat, so we were searching around in Champneys Cove, and lo and behold, we found a schooner wreck, and we dove down on it. It's a very challenging wreck for diving on because it's in a really soft, muddy bottom. And the wreck has actually sunk down to the deck in the mud. So it's only the masts that are sticking out of the mud. So we just, after a lot of searching, some of the divers found the masts. And then I came home and started doing research. What ship is this? And lo and behold, the folks, Dale Jarvis and Tara Barrett and Heather, had published this great oral history from Champneys West on the sinking of the Hazel Pearl. And they talked to all these folks in the community that were little kids when it sank. And so we got the whole story, and there's even part of the topmast from the ship was drug up by a fisherman's net years after it sank. And it's now sitting on the lawn in front of the local community museum. So it's amazing when you get those oral histories to match up with the shipwreck. You get this multi-layered picture of what happened and who it affected, which is so much better than just the physical shipwreck on the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah. Any thoughts on just like kind of the marriage of all that together there?
I love the Hazel Pearl story. It's fabulous because it really it was one of those situations where the community knew the story, and then for a very long time, the local narrative was if you came in on your like fishing boat or whatever into the harbor and you looked down, you could actually see the whites of the masts under the surface because she sank in relatively shallow water. And then just one day somebody was bringing along a trawl net and went, "Oops." Took off the spar, and it's outside. I think the community center in the community, and I think that one was really interesting because we had it was Dale and Tara who had gone out and done all these interviews, and there were people who said they remembered their dad saying, "Oh, that ship's coming in way too fast. That's just shipwreck waiting to happen," and then 20 minutes later, whack. Because there was a storm coming in. It was going from Catalina to St. John's. There was a storm coming in, so the captain was trying to take safe harbor to get out of the storm. Met slob ice in the mouth of the harbor, so figured it was fine to continue going in at full sail. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Hit really, because the harbor gets shallow quite quick, so the ice hardens very closer to shore, and smacked right into the hard ice. And again, to go with kind of the difference in narrative or oral history, some people say it sank in 15 minutes, some people say it sank overnight, but it became one of these kind of community memories of, oh, we have this story that we can tell, and it's something where the community members were directly involved with the rescue, and all souls were saved, along with, I think, 15 barrels of cod liver oil. It was, but
Children
I think
rejoice.
I think it's...
See, and that's a really interesting part of the story. The ship was carrying more than 100 of these barrels of cod liver oil on the deck. And the local folks managed to salvage a lot of that before the ship sank. And a lot of it disappeared into the ether, and they sold those barrels and got a huge jump in income from it. So that's one of these events that the community really remembers because it had a huge impact on everybody.
And that was fairly common. If you had a ship that was, going down, and sometimes, and one of the gentlemen who was interviewed even said it was like, there were some things that were sneaked, maybe. But if a ship was declared a loss, it wasn't uncommon for locals to go out and see what could be salvaged.
You salvage whatever you can from it.
And actually, my father-in-law in his front hall has a weather glass that his father handed down to him that I think was actually taken off the SS Marsland, and because they were fishermen out of St. John's.
Right.
And I think that's where that came from, because it was from a ship that was wrecked in front of Fort Amherst. I'm like, I think I know where you got that, but it still
That's cool.
sits there. Yeah.
So then for this conversation, if we're talking about shipwrecks and just what we've learned from folks on the ocean, what is it, and we've already had the comment too about like the ocean eating things. Like when did you really start to think about the power of the ocean? Like, for example, for me, I remember back when my first times on one of the coastal defense vessels, when I was actually so I went from the simulators to actually navigating on a ship. And I was like, oh, okay, this thing can move, and there's a lot of weight behind this. And then a few months later, I was going from St. John's to Halifax, and it was, you had like 7-8 meter swells, thunder and lightning and sleet. And it was one of those trips across the strait. And I was like holding onto the radar. And I'm like, this is a lot. And it just made me kind of think about the folks who don't make it. What about with yourselves? What moments have there been? Go for it.
Sure. I'm from St. John's. I grew up all my life. I'm used to stories of the sea, to seeing it physically, especially when the waves are coming, when there's a proper storm outside. As a little girl, I've been on boats, like just even small ones, just off the coast. And even as a small child, you're like, oh, this is pretty bumpy. But I think it's the first time, surprisingly, I actually went on a cruise ship. Like the modern big ships of today, which just kind of dwarf everything from the past. And you're out in the middle of the ocean. So I was in the Caribbean then. Yeah. And it's just, there's only one ship. It's just flat. And there's nothing else. And all you know is like, oh, it's very pretty sunset. But then you realize, oh, there's just down, and you can't see down, and you don't know what's below. And then so I was 18 then, and then you start getting into research and history. I love from the last 10 years of just how many shipwrecks have happened. Like the power, like how people use the sea from, which is the Iron Age, probably earlier, till today. That's thousands of human years, and just how many potential shipwrecks, at least like say in the Mediterranean alone, there probably are. They're innumerable. And then you start watching, and then you have YouTube coming on. You start watching videos of the swells in like the North Sea and the different fishermen and the ships that go up in the North Sea, and just the swells and how high those like 100-foot waves sometimes are. And then you realize that the sea is all powerful, and there's a reason that it's like 70% of the earth.
Yep.
It's just wild that like we're at a time when we can experience all this stuff. We can see these videos. We can find out so much more that's just right there at our fingertips, and yet we still we're having discussions about sea blindness, people not understanding as much and not being as connected to it as they once were. With just a few minutes left, any final thoughts around any of these points here today, folks? Who wants to go for it? Neil, I'm looking at you.
Like when you're talking about storms and realizing the power of the sea, I kind of went back and started rereading some of the oral history from the Truxtun and Pollux. The Maritime History Archive has a fabulous website on the wrecks of those American Navy ships. And, the guys were saying that the Truxtun was aground high out of the water, like 50 feet out of the water, and the waves were coming over the side of the ship.
Right.
And carrying the guys off and they were being pounded into mincemeat against the rocks on shore.
Yeah.
And it was a lucky few that got to shore and survived. And it's like, it doesn't take much imagination to realize, oh my God, what a nightmare that would have been for those men. And then thinking about the folks from St. Lawrence and Lawn that came out through snow up to their knees to rescue these guys and lower down ropes and do everything they did. I mean, just the scale of effort and bravery and determination in the middle of a blizzard in February.
Just 100% misery for the conditions.
Yep. And I mean, every one of the sailors from that ship said we'd all be dead if it wasn't for the local folks coming to our aid.
Yeah.
And there's a long history of that, and countless shipwrecks where that's the case, like the Water Witch up in Pooch Cove, that the anniversary was this year. Same thing, guys being local fishermen lowered down on ropes hundreds of feet and pulling up the survivors one by one. I mean, my geez. I do a lot of climbing, and thinking about going down on a natural fiber rope 100 years ago, pretty dodgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and plus, the conditions and wet and cold and everything else. Yeah, you're like, how did you manage to rescue one, let alone, more? Final thoughts?
I mean, I can speak more to kind of the moment of.
Yeah.
I
We've
can
got
talk
about
back.
30 seconds.
I can talk fast. No, my grandfather, my great grandfather was a fisherman on Lake Huron, I believe. My mom may correct me on that later. Sorry, Mom. And there was a family story that he went out on the boat with my grandfather. Went out on the boat with my great grandfather, and a storm came up, and my great grandfather had to lash him to the mast at the front of their ship so that he didn't get swept away, so he could focus on just getting the boat back to port. And that was family lore I grew up with, so it's really not that surprising that I ended up where I did.
No, very much so. Meaghan, Julia, final thoughts from either of you?
I just remember I did a little historical ship sailing, so tall ships. I didn't go anywhere very impressive, but I just remember the visceral feeling of holding onto the rope and hearing the advice of the people training me, and they're going, if you ever directly pit yourself against any of these forces out here, you will lose.
Yeah.
You will lose against the wind. You will lose against the water. You could tell. You could feel it. Didn't have to be bad weather.
No, well, and I think that's a good place to end it on today. We are out of time. Thank you all for this conversation. And folks, as you're listening, the signal at cbc.ca for notes. And I'm just seeing we had an email in. I'll show the pictures that you sent in for the guests now once we're off the air. So thank you so much for that email, Daryl. Tomorrow on the show, we're digging into the magazine Edible for Newfoundland and Labrador. We're talking food, culture, content right across the province. Don't miss the show. Cheers.